Arthur Conan Doyle, The Sign of the Four. Chapter 1. The Science of Deduction. Sherlock Holmes took his bottle from the corner of the mantelpiece and his hypodermic syringe from its small leather case. With his long, white, nervous fingers, he fixed the thin needle and pulled back his left shirt cuff. For a short time, his eyes looked carefully at his strong forearm and wrist, which were full of many small marks and scars from needles. At last, he pushed the sharp needle into his arm, pressed the small piston, and leaned back into the soft armchair with a long, happy sigh. For many months, I had seen this action 3 times a day, but I could not get used to it. On the contrary, every day it made me more annoyed, and every night I felt more guilty because I did not have the courage to protest. Again and again, I promised myself that I would speak about it, but there was something in my companion's calm and careless manner that made him the last person with whom one would take such a liberty. His great abilities, his confident way of acting, and my experience of his many unusual qualities all made me shy and unwilling to oppose him. Yet on that afternoon, maybe because of the bone wine I had with lunch, or because I was even more annoyed by his very slow and careful way of doing things, I suddenly felt that I could not stay silent any longer. "Which is it today?" I asked. "Morphine or cocaine?" He slowly raised his eyes from the old book he was reading. "It is cocaine," he said. "A 7% solution. Would you like to try it?" "No, indeed," I answered shortly. "My body has not recovered from the Afghan war yet. I cannot put any extra strain on it." He smiled at my strong reaction. "Perhaps you are right, Watson," he said. "I suppose it is physically harmful, but I find it so extremely stimulating and clear for the mind that its bad effects later are not very important." "But think," I said seriously, "consider the price. Your brain may be active and excited, but it is an unhealthy process. It causes changes in the body and may finally leave a permanent weakness. You also know how terrible you feel afterwards. Surely it is not worth it. Why should you risk losing your great abilities for a short moment of pleasure? Remember that I speak not only as a friend, but as a doctor who is partly responsible for your health." He did not seem angry. On the contrary, he put his fingers together and rested his elbows on the arms of his chair, like someone who enjoys a good conversation. "My mind," he said, "hates being idle. Give me problems, give me work, give me the most difficult code or the most complex analysis, and I feel at home. Then I do not need artificial stimulants. But I hate the boring routine of life. I want strong mental excitement. That is why I chose my own special profession, or rather created it, because I am the only one in the world." "The only unofficial detective?" I said, raising my eyebrows. "The only unofficial consulting detective," he answered. "I am the final and highest authority in solving crimes. When Gregson or Lestrade or Athelney Jones cannot handle a case, which, by the way, is their usual situation, the matter is brought to me. I examine the facts as an expert and give my professional opinion. I do not take any credit in such cases. My name does not appear in the newspapers. The work itself, the pleasure of using my special abilities, is my greatest reward. But you have already seen some of my methods in the Jefferson Hope case." "Yes, of course," I said warmly. "I have never been so impressed by anything in my life. I even wrote a small book about it with the rather unusual title, A Study in Scarlet." He shook his head sadly. "I looked through it," he said. "Honestly, I cannot congratulate you. Detection is, or should be, an exact science, and it should be treated in a cold and unemotional way. You tried to add romance to it, which has the same effect as if you added a love story or an escape with a lover into the 5th proposition of Euclid. But the romance was really there, I argued. I could not change the facts. Some facts should be left out, or at least treated with the right sense of proportion. The only point in the case that deserved attention was the interesting analytical reasoning from results to causes, which allowed me to solve it. I was annoyed by this criticism of a work that I had written especially to please him. I must also admit that I was irritated by his ego, which seemed to want every line of my book to be about his own actions. More than once in the years I had lived with him in Baker Street, I had noticed that a small vanity was hidden under his calm and teaching manner. However, I said nothing and sat quietly, holding my injured leg. I had been shot in it by a Giselle bullet some time before, and although I could still walk, it hurt badly whenever the weather changed. "My work has recently extended to Europe," said Holmes after a while, as he filled his old pipe. "Last week, I was asked for advice by François Le Villard, who, as you may know, has become quite well known in the French detective service. He has the Celtic ability for quick intuition, but he does not have the wide and exact knowledge that is necessary for the higher level of his profession. The case was about a will, and had some interesting details. I was able to point him to two similar cases, one in Riga in 1857 and the other in St. Louis in 1871, which helped him find the correct solution. Here is the letter I received this morning to thank me for my help." He threw me a crumpled piece of foreign paper as he spoke. I looked over it quickly and saw many words of praise, with expressions like magnifique, coup de maître, and tour de force, all showing the Frenchman's strong admiration. "He speaks as a student to his teacher," I said. "Oh, he values my help too much," said Sherlock Holmes lightly. "He has good abilities himself. He has two of the three qualities needed for the perfect detective. He has the power of observation and the power of deduction. He only lacks knowledge, and that can come with time. He is now translating my small works into French." "Your works?" "Oh, didn't you know?" he said, laughing. "Yes, I have written several monographs. They are all on technical subjects. Here, for example, is one called Upon the Distinction Between the Ashes of the Various Tobaccos. In it, I list 140 types of cigar, cigarette, and pipe tobacco, with colored pictures showing the differences in the ash. This is something that often appears in criminal cases and can sometimes be very important as a clue. If you can say for certain, for example, that a murder was done by a man who was smoking an Indian lunka, it clearly reduces the number of possible suspects. To a trained eye, there is as much difference between the black ash of a trichinopoly and the white ash of bird's eye tobacco as there is between a cabbage and a potato. "You have an extraordinary talent for small details," I said. "I understand their importance. Here is my monograph about tracking footsteps, with some notes about using plaster of Paris to keep footprints. Here is also a small but interesting work about how a person's job affects the shape of the hand, with pictures of the hands of roof workers, sailors, cork cutters, printers, weavers, and diamond polishers. This is very useful for a scientific detective, especially in cases of unknown dead bodies or when discovering the past of criminals. But I am boring you with my hobby." "Not at all," I answered seriously. "It interests me very much, especially because I have seen how you use it in practice. But you spoke earlier about observation and deduction. Surely one of them partly includes the other." "Not really," he answered, leaning back comfortably in his armchair and blowing thick blue smoke from his pipe. "For example, observation tells me that you went to the Wigmore Street post office this morning, but deduction tells me that while you were there, you sent a telegram." "Correct," I said. "Correct in both cases. But I admit I do not understand how you knew that. It was a sudden decision, and I did not tell anyone about it. It is very simple, he said, smiling at my surprise. So simple that an explanation is almost unnecessary. But it can help show the difference between observation and deduction. Observation tells me that you have some red dirt on your shoe. Right outside the Wigmore Street post office, they are repairing the street and have dug up the ground. The earth is placed in such a way that it is hard not to step on it when entering. The soil has a special red color which, as far as I know, cannot be found anywhere else nearby. That is observation. The rest is deduction. How, then, did you deduce the telegram? Of course, I knew that you had not written a letter, because I sat opposite you all morning. I also see in your open desk that you have a sheet of stamps and a large bundle of postcards. So why would you go to the post office except to send a telegram? Remove all other possibilities, and the one that remains must be the truth. In this case, that is certainly correct, I replied after thinking for a moment. However, as you say, this example is very simple. Would you think me rude if I tested your theories in a more difficult way? Not at all, he answered. It would stop me from taking another dose of cocaine. I would be very happy to examine any problem you give me. I have heard you say that it is difficult for a man to use an object every day without leaving signs of his personality on it, so that a trained observer can read it. Now, I have a watch here that has recently come into my possession. Would you be so kind as to give me your opinion about the character or habits of its previous owner? I gave him the watch with a small feeling of amusement, because I thought the test was impossible. I meant it as a lesson against the confident and sometimes dogmatic way he spoke. He held the watch in his hand, looked carefully at the front, opened the back, and examined the inside, first with his eyes and then with a strong magnifying glass. I could hardly stop myself from smiling when I saw his disappointed face as he closed the case and gave it back to me. There is almost no information, he said. The watch has been cleaned recently, which removes my most useful clues. You are right, I answered. It was cleaned before it was sent to me. In my mind, I thought that my friend was giving a weak excuse to hide his failure. What information could he expect from a watch that had not been cleaned? Even so, my investigation has not been completely useless, he said, looking up at the ceiling with dull and thoughtful eyes. Unless you correct me, I would say that the watch belonged to your older brother, who received it from your father. You see that, of course, from the letters HW on the back. Yes, the letter W suggests your family name. The watch is about 50 years old, and the initials are as old as the watch, so it was made for the previous generation. Jewelry is usually passed to the oldest son, and he often has the same name as his father. Your father has, if I remember correctly, been dead for many years, so the watch must have been in the hands of your older brother. Correct so far, I said. Anything else? He was a man with messy habits, very messy and careless. He had good opportunities, but he wasted them. He lived in poverty for some time, with short periods of success, and in the end, he became an alcoholic and died. That is all I can say. I jumped up from my chair and walked around the room with difficulty, feeling very upset. This is not worthy of you, Holmes, I said. I could not believe that you would do this. You have asked about the history of my unfortunate brother, and now you pretend to discover this knowledge in some clever way. You cannot expect me to believe that you have learned all this from his old watch. It is unkind, and, to speak honestly, it has something of a trick in it. My dear doctor, he said kindly, please accept my apologies. I was thinking about it as a simple problem and forgot how personal and painful it could be for you. I assure you, however, that I did not even know you had a brother until you gave me the watch. Then how in the world did you find out these facts? They are completely correct in every detail. Ah, that is good luck. I could only say what was most likely. I did not expect to be so accurate. But it was not just guessing? No, I never guess. It is a very bad habit, and it destroys clear thinking. What seems strange to you is only because you do not follow my thinking, or notice the small facts on which big conclusions depend. For example, I began by saying that your brother was careless. When you look at the lower part of the watch case, you can see that it is not only dented in 2 places, but also scratched and damaged all over. This comes from the habit of keeping other hard objects, such as coins or keys, in the same pocket. It is easy to suppose that a man who treats a very expensive watch in this way must be careless. It is also a reasonable conclusion that a man who owns such a valuable object is well provided for in other ways. I nodded to show that I understood his reasoning. It is very common for pawnbrokers in England, when they take a watch, to scratch the ticket number with a small point on the inside of the case. It is more convenient than a label, because there is no risk of losing or mixing up the number. I can see at least 4 such numbers inside this case. So, we can conclude that your brother was often short of money. A second conclusion is that he sometimes had periods of better fortune, or he would not have been able to get the watch back. Finally, look at the inside plate where the keyhole is. See the many scratches around the hole, marks where the key slipped? What steady person would make such marks? But you will always see them on a drunk man's watch. He winds it at night and leaves these signs of his unsteady hand. Where is the mystery in all this? It is as clear as daylight, I answered. I regret that I judged you unfairly. I should have trusted your remarkable ability more. May I ask if you have any professional case at the moment? None. That is why I use cocaine. I cannot live without work for my brain. What else is there to live for? Come and stand by the window. Has there ever been such a dull, sad, and useless world? Look how the yellow fog moves down the street and spreads across the gray houses. What could be more hopelessly ordinary and material? What is the use of having abilities, Doctor, if one has no place to use them? Crime is ordinary, life is ordinary, and only ordinary qualities have any use in this world. I was about to answer this speech when our landlady came in with a quick knock, carrying a card on a brass tray. "A young lady for you, sir," she said, speaking to my companion. "Miss Mary Morstan," he read. I do not remember that name. Ask the young lady to come up, Mrs. Hudson. Do not leave, Doctor. I would prefer you to stay.